Well, joining us for this hour, Stephen Guilfoyle, Managing Director of Floor Operations at Deep Value Executive Services, and also Craig Erlam, Market Analyst at Oanda in London. So we thank you both for joining us. Let's start off with you, Stephen Guilfoyle. You noted that when we talked about the bookies, that actually, tell us about the breakdown. More people were betting on Remain, but you actually looked further into the data.
Well, actually, most of the money was on Remain. About 75% of the money was on Remain, but close to 70% of the individual bets were on Exit, which means that the regular people, the common people, the people that are disaffected and possibly voting against the status quo, they were going for Exit.
Craig Erlam, hi. You know, we're seeing huge moves to the downside right now in the markets the world over. When does this end? Does it end? How low do we go? What do you do?
Well, I mean, when it ends I guess we're going to have to see over the next week or so. I think we've seen the bulk of the move right now. We saw the bulk of the move really before 4 or 5 a.m. this morning in the UK. I think we will continue to see volatility. I think this uncertainty, which is now hanging over the markets, could continue to weigh on them. I hate to use a cliche, but the markets really do hate uncertainty. So
right.
I would expect more volatility and downside to come. How long it lasts really just depends on how well policymakers and how well politicians do to calm investors and really suggest or tell them that it's not all going to be bad. Because the problem that we've now got is, prior to the actual vote itself, we were getting told this was going to be an absolute catastrophe. Now the same people have got to come out and tell us that it's all going to be fine. Let's just see how investors react to these reassuring, calming words.
Craig, you know, you make a great point, because there is a lot of uncertainty. We're seeing the VIX, the fear index, move to 4-month highs as everybody does have these nervous jitters. On Wall Street, Stephen, I wanted to ask you, as we get that opening bell at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time, we're off the lows, had been down over 800 for Dow futures. Now we're down 489. Your thoughts on the open, and where are we at lunchtime and where are we at the close?
Well, you know, traders, we've been preparing for this day because we had a feeling there could be a pretty large sell-off. In fact, thankfully, that forced me to get out of a couple of longs myself, put some cash on the table so I could be ready for this. As we look at this uncertainty, we see in Europe, we see several countries that are probably lined up to maybe have their own exit votes. We see the Prime Minister of the UK resigning, but not till October, which I think really takes too long because you want to get the ball rolling as far as getting this 2-year process going. So I think your better discount, if you're a bargain hunter today, is in the S&P 500, not in the stock 600, even though you're only getting a 3% discount here, as opposed to a 6, 7, or 8% discount there.
Okay, good point.
Let's go back over to Craig now to ask your opinion on the action that we've been seeing. As we noted, we've been seeing the sell-off and getting exactly what we expected from a leave vote, which would be running to the safe havens of Treasury bonds, gold. We'll likely see utilities, all the defensive plays. What do you think the trading action is likely to be, and calm investor fears now, if possible?
Well, I think, as you mentioned, we did see a big run for safety. I think prior to the actual vote itself, as you've already touched on, people were way too overconfident that we were going to vote to Remain. I think they were really tracking those betting odds far too closely, and when in the run-up to the actual vote itself, I think markets were far too high. As far as now is concerned, like you say, we are seeing a lot of support for gold. The Japanese yen, in terms of the currency space, which creates issues in itself, I guess, because the Japanese officials and the Bank of Japan has repeatedly warned about the over-strengthening of the currency, and then this morning the UK decides to exit the EU, and once again people start buying the yen. Are we going to see them intervene finally to weaken the currency and cause further turbulence in the markets? I guess in terms of, like I say, over the next week or two, I do think we will continue to see this repeated risk aversion. Whether that leads to significant sell-offs, I'm not necessarily convinced by that. I do think the markets, while they haven't bottomed out, I do think the majority of the moves now have been priced in, and we will just start to see maybe a little bit more stability or finding a floor, at least with periods of intraday volatility, as more and more comments are made and we start to find out what the next 2 years is actually going to look like.
What is does Great Britain leaving the European Union signal to you a dismantling and an end of Europe as we know it, or as we've known it since World War II?
It certainly increases the probability. I guess this is going to be the sticking point now. The UK has repeatedly said, or the people campaigning for exit have repeatedly said, we can get a good deal from the EU. The EU now has a decision to make. Does it care more about trade with the UK and the money that that brings into the European Union, or does it care more about keeping the 27 members that remain happy and preventing any further referendums, which are already being touted in places like the Netherlands, Spain? We're seeing a rise of support for anti-EU campaigners. In France, we're seeing people fighting against the establishment. And I think, really, if we get a good deal now, surely there's going to be calls in these countries for referendums as well. It's going to be a tough 2 years for the EU.
Craig Erlam, I have to say now we are hearing so many countries speaking and saying exactly that, concerns about immigration, concerns about trade, and now we had Britain make this vote, and this is an historic day, and we'll see whether or not other countries follow suit. Craig Erlam, we thank you very much of Oanda there in London. Thank you.
Yeah.